that internal mobility question I think is interesting. How many, we don't have to talk about current clients or whatever it is, just businesses that you have come across or seen or read about in the press, but as well as that with current clients, how many do you think are actually really cracking that code, but being able to successfully deliver on that internal mobility piece?
I don't think anyone has cracked it successfully.
I totally agree. Very, very few. Yeah.
The introduction of technology like talent marketplaces make it a easier conversation to have with clients, but I don't see it being, cracked successfully. And Chris, you've done a lot with talent marketplace.
I think we'll really focus more on internal people, internal mobility, and creating the environment where it's a true marketplace. What's a marketplace about? It's about you and me, me either wanting to buy your services or your product, and vice versa. So it's finding that right price. So I think it's at the simplest level, really encouraging that discussion to happen. I do also think it's not just about an internal marketplace. I think it's the external marketplaces around contractors that you need for a very short period of time to focus on a particular skill. So I think it's focusing on the internal mobility side, broadening that out, actually having the view, but I then also think, working out the best way that you can work with the external marketplace.
So in my view right now, the biggest opportunity in talent is creating this ability for talent mobility. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the biggest missed opportunity right now. And the reason why it's being missed is because almost no organizations, very few organizations, have a strategic workforce planning capability, which is where everything starts from, right? Yeah. You have to, back to your skills point, you have to take it up right to the top level, which is how many people do we need to fulfill the supply of workers for this year, but also out 18 months. And it's funny, when I'm doing conferences, one of the things I like to ask people, which is like, big conference, how many of you know exactly how many people you have today? And the hands go up, yeah, we do. Okay, well, hold the hand up just a moment. Now, how many of you know how many you're gonna need in 18 months and what skills? Almost all the hands go down. You say, right, there's the problem, right? If you wanna solve something in talent, that's the thing you need to get your head around, which is to be able to do a strategic workforce plan, which then says, okay, we don't need to get rid of people in the recession because we actually need them. Oh, and we need these types of people. So for me, it's like, it'll really take off when people get good at that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people avoid strategic workforce planning because it's hard. Mm-hmm. And they don't have necessarily the people or the technology to do it. But it's a huge opportunity for those who crack it. One company that's really good at it is IBM, and they've been very good at it for a number of years. And it's paid a lot, big dividends for them.
Yeah, and interesting, you talked about the technology there. I wonder, just some reflections from the three of you guys, I wonder how many businesses just have the perspective that will solve our particular issue. And if they don't cover the whole gamut of, what actually do we need, it's just going to end up being an expensive bit of kit that they don't use and gathers dust somewhere.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to do strategic workforce planning, you have to decide that is culturally what we do. We find out what talent we need, where we need it, and we try to use it internally. And we try to keep people during the good times and the bad times. We don't overhire, we don't overfire. We have a steady way of doing things. So it's, first of all, you decide you have a culture of doing that. Then you put in place a set of an operating model and processes. And then lastly, you go and get the technology. It allows you to use AI and things to model and forecast. And that's really the way of doing it, but it's not an easy thing to do. And the question is, does HR own that? Maybe not, don't know.
Yeah. Alice?
Yeah, I mean, even when we've been speaking to clients around strategic workforce planning and where they do potentially have that capability, and it's set up really well, it's technology enabled, the missing piece is taking those insights and for business leaders to make decisions based on it. That is the bit that I see that is lacking. No one knows where that should sit. Who owns that?
Is it finance? Is it ops? Is it HR?
Is it HR?
Yeah.
And therefore, it's kind of missing the opportunity that strategic workforce planning really gives, which is, making sure the organisation is effective as it could be.
SWP is almost like an afterthought, or not enough time is spent actually thinking about what are the possible models, what are the different ways in which we could actually go. And I think this is the whole thing. It's not a one path, it's a discussion around multiple paths, and then what does everyone get behind, what does everyone understand. So I think the biggest part that's missing is saying it's so important that we need to focus, a chunk of time to work through that. I think then capability, I'm not sure that all organizations, because it's not something that's done regularly. So I wonder whether there's, a huge opportunity to develop strategic workforce planning, education programs. I think there's probably something that's necessary. I think it's also then the technology, there's definitely technology around that supports that. I think it's getting the right technology that works for you as well.
One of the interesting conversations that I just wanted you guys to just give me your perspectives on was this idea around you can't just hire people that are all exactly the same, because culturally, you end up with a group of homogenized robots effectively. And I wonder if we should just circle back to that kind of the internal mobility, or the being able to look at your own skills within your business and balance it with the external hiring as well. So, okay, Chris, I'll start with you, but then come in when you guys want to. Just touch on some of those conversations that we had around, you need a little bit different in culture, don't you? You need to pick a little bit from different sides to get that kind of balance.
Many organizations and companies think you need a degree, for example, to do something. It's challenging ourselves and saying, actually, it doesn't matter that if someone doesn't have a degree. It's, not focusing around age, for example. So, I think Tim has written a recent article about
let's touch on that in a minute.
So stuff like that I think is great to challenge and go, we should be looking at different talent pools. We shouldn't be going to the same thing all the time. I think then there's making sure that there's not a culture bias. And I think the interesting thing, we quite often, I've heard this many times in not just our organization, but in many companies, they're a great cultural fit. Yay, yes, they're the right person for the job. Yeah. Now, I think...
Is it because they're called Chris?
Apparently in our organization, that's a big tick in your favor. I think definitely, I think if we can be more aware of what we're doing, why we're doing it, where we're going, that's definitely the case.
Nice. So Tim, Chris just mentioned about the pro-retirement article, which was featured in the Telegraph. Can you just give us a bit of an overview as to that, and just put some colour on it as to your reference to what Chris was saying?
I think right now organizations and industries are being forced to find talent in places they haven't found before. And one of those, and the government has actually started a program this spring of helping and incenting organizations to go take those people who retired during the pandemic and get them back to work. Which I think is a fabulous program. And it's actually been happening before. Barclays was one of the first people to do this 10 years ago, and it was fabulously successful. And so the governments get behind this. And essentially the idea is, there's something like 2 or 3 million people who retired in the UK during the pandemic who weren't expected to. So it's a huge gap that's created. And so essentially what you want to do is get those people who have retired and get them to come back. But they're going to work on their own terms, their own hours, their own things that they want to do. And so it's this idea of pro-retirement where you can still kind of be retired, but you're doing some part-time work that is in a space that you know really well and you like doing, and it's adding value and then productivity to the economy. So, sort of coming out of retirement, but still kind of, having your time is sort of pro-retirement. That's the idea of it. So rather than retire, pro-retire. And these programs, and the U.S. is doing a very similar thing, are starting to be really popular. And people saying, I'll come back if it's on my terms, and if I don't have a crappy boss, then I'll come back. And it's starting to work. And I guess maybe I'm an example. I was retired over the pandemic, and
we dragged you back in.
Our lovely founders, Aaron and Kathy. I'm very lucky to be brought. But for me, it was like, this is a no-brainer. I love doing this, so I'll come and do this. Anyway. That's kind of that piece. But just one other piece I think is really important. Just a story about this diverse pools. A friend of mine, a neighbor, is executive producer of some reality TV shows, which you might know. And the hardest hit industry right now, I think, or one of the hardest for talent, is the movie and television. It's just really hard to get producers and people to develop content. And so basically they said, look, we just got to stop going to the white male pool, and why don't we go to the LGBT community in East London in Shoreditch, or why don't we go to Birmingham into the Indian Pakistani community there, Muslim community, and they've actively hired people from these communities, long story short, they're coming up with new shows that'll come out in the next couple of years, and they're coming up with shows they never dreamed that they would get. It's kind of the well had gone dry in kind of what they've been doing, and now he's very excited about these new shows that he says there's no way we would have thought of these without him having those people in.